the psalm of the black iron gauntlet. The heart is a traitor in the silence. It is a biological betrayer, a flesh and blood drum that pounds out your position to the hunting things that listen in the dark. Mine was no longer a simple organ, a mere pump pushing the river of my life through the fragile channels of my veins. It had transmuted, through some alchemical process of terror, into a war drum, a timpani of pure, unadulterated panic, hammering a frantic, desperate rhythm against the bony cage of my ribs. Thud, thud, thud. Each beat was the sound of a siege engine ramming a gate, the percussive announcement of my own fragile existence to a cosmos that did not care. I stood as a witness, not in the sterile, civilized confines of a courtroom built from wood and law, but in the gray country, that liminal, tattered veil where the boundary between the waking world and the nightmare phrase like wet silk caught in a thresher. This was the in-between place, the no man's land of the soul. The wind here did not simply blow, it prowled. It was a predator, moving with a low, guttural howl that vibrated not in the ears, but in the very roots of the teeth. It carried with it the coppery, metallic taste of ancient congealed blood and the sibilant, chittering whispers of an eternity that did not wish us well, an eternity that actively resented our brief, warm flicker of consciousness. My soul felt microscopic, infinitesimal, a lone, defiant ember flickering in a vast, star-choked void, trembling under the crushing, specific gravity of forces both radiant and malevolent. To look up was to court madness, to invite the abyss, to stare back into you. The sky was not a gentle, atmospheric dome of blue and gray. It was a bruising, a cosmic contusion. It was a roiling, seething expanse where some stars glowed with the distant, steady promise of salvation, unwavering beacons of pure light piercing the Stygian dark, while others snarled. Yes, stars that snarled. These were primal lights, celestial bodies possessing a malice older than the cooling of the galaxies themselves. Their forms seemed to shift and writhe, like shadows cast by forgotten, continent-sized horrors that clawed ceaselessly at the edges of existence, waiting for the membrane of reality to thin just enough, just for a moment, to push a single monstrous finger through. I carried the ancient psalms. They were not polite, comforting prayers to be mumbled in the safety of a warm, polished pew. In this place, in the gray country, they were ammunition. They were heavy caliber truths, rounds forged in the fires of desperate faith, those sacred cries of desperate souls, poured out by prophets who had seen the terrifying faces of angels and the gaping maws of beasts, burned in my mind like white-hot branding irons. Their words were entwined with elusive whispers of forbidden truths, apocryphal echoes, and shadowed knowledge that pulsed with a power too vast, too raw, for my fragile meat brain to fully comprehend. But I grasped them. I held onto them with a desperate, white-knuckled intensity, as a drowning man holds a jagged, waterlogged rock in a hurricane. These were my anchor, my only light. They guided me through a twisting, non-Euclidean labyrinth where divine glory and unspeakable terror did not just meet. They collided with the cataclysmic force of tectonic plates. It is here that God's hand is not a gentle, paternal touch. It is a grip of iron. Blazing with a relentless, holy light, it gripped my trembling, insignificant life, even as the darkness writhed and coiled to consume it. The friction between that divine grip and the abyssal pull sparked a fire in my very marrow, a spiritual forge where my soul was being reforged. I share this now, not as a simple story to be told around a campfire, but as a raw, visceral autopsy of the night, a ledger of suspense, dread, and unanticipated horrors. A story of faith tested not by philosophical doubt, but by teeth, by claws, by the nightmarish, reality-bending twists where God's unyielding light pierces a suffocating abyss, etching his truth into my very bones with the exquisite, searing pain of a tattoo needle, culminating in a vision of the New Jerusalem's eternal, unassailable radiance. Lord, be my refuge, I whispered. My voice was a ghost, a wisp of sound, shaking, barely audible over the predatory wind. But I knew, with a certainty that defied the evidence of my senses, that only faith could shield me from the terrors that stalked the periphery of my vision, from the things that moved just beyond the corner of my eye. Their screams echoed through the night, a night that was no mere absence of light. No, darkness here was a presence. It was a living entity with mass and malevolent intent. Its cold, damp air clung to my skin like the foul, necrotic breath of something ancient and ravenous, a wet sheet plastered over the cold flesh of a corpse. Its touch sent shivers surging down my spine, a profound violation, as if the darkness itself were trying to seep through my pores and colonize the marrow of my bones, to hollow me out from within. I knelt in a forsaken grove. The architecture of the place was fundamentally wrong. The trees were twisted, skeletal sentinels, their bark looking less like wood and more like petrified, striated muscle. Their gnarled arthritic branches scraped at a sky that roiled with clouds pulsing with an eerie, sickly green glow, the color of a bruise on a dead man's flesh, the color of radium and rot. It was as if the heavens themselves were infected with some cosmic gangrene, a plague that threatened to necrotize the very stars. The air reeked. It wasn't just the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. It was the smell of a freshly opened grave in a forgotten swamp. A sour metallic stench that crawled into my nostrils and coated the back of my throat, the acrid taste of copper and stagnant black water. It hinted at something dead and restless buried deep beneath the soil, a secret the earth itself seemed desperate to hide, its roots curling around it like the ribs of a cage, imprisoning it. My heart thundered. The war drum accelerated, its beat becoming a frantic, chaotic rhythm. My breath came in sharp, ragged gasps, misting in the freezing air. I whispered a desperate prayer, forcing the words out through teeth clenched tight enough to crack. Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness. You who have freed me from distress, whose mercy is my shield against the terrors that stalk me. The words left my lips and hung in the air, glowing faintly with a spiritual resonance, a small bubble of defiant light in the oppressive dark. And then the forest answered. It was not a bird. It was not a beast. It was a shrill, piercing scream that tore through the fabric of the forest like a jagged sheet of metal ripping through canvas. It echoed with a haunting, unnatural resonance, multiplying in the fog, bouncing from tree to tree until it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. We're going to get you. We're going to get you. It was a woman's voice, but the timbre was wrong. It was jagged, layered, discordant, a chorus of agonies trapped in a single sound. It sounded like a woman's voice recorded on a wax cylinder and played back at the wrong speed through a throat filled with broken glass. Her words dripped with a liquid malice, heavy and viscous. It was the voice of something that had forgotten what it was like to be human, or perhaps had never been human at all, but merely wore a human voice like a stolen, ill-fitting coat. I spun around, my boots sliding in the slick, viscous mud. My eyes darted through the churning fog, seeking a target, a source for the horror. And there she was, a figure barely visible in the mist, standing between two massive, moss-covered oaks. Her silhouette was wrong. Her body was contorted at impossible angles, the kind of angles that suggest dislocated joints, snapped femurs, and a spine that had been broken and re-knitted into a knot. Her head was cocked to the side, resting almost on her shoulder, her neck elongated like taffy pulled by a cruel child. Her face was pale, a mask of alabaster terror, but it was twisted. Her eyes glowed, not with reflected light, but with a generated internal light, twin moons of cold, dead fish-belly luminescence. Her mouth split into an unnatural grin, stretching far too wide, revealing gums that were black and teeth that were too sharp, too numerous. We're going to get you. The sound slammed into me physically. It bounced off the trees, reverberating until it felt like a chorus of unseen tormentors surrounded me, their voices a symphony of my own demise. I sensed them then, the watchers, unseen eyes glowing faintly in the oppressive dark, blinking in unison, a slow, predatory rhythm. They did not look with warmth or curiosity. They looked with a chilling, clinical scrutiny, a predatory assessment, weighing my worth against the vastness of eternity. They were calculating the caloric value of my soul, the spiritual nourishment it might provide. Sweat drenched my brow, freezing instantly in the biting wind. My hands trembled, fingers curling into fists, my nails digging into my palms. But I did not run. The Zerga instinct, that ancient warrior code buried deep in the DNA of the faithful, searched. I clung to faith not as a flimsy blanket, but as a shield of black iron. God, hide me in the shadow of your wings. I cried out. This wasn't just hope. It was a fire in my gut, a combustion engine of the spirit kicking over with a deafening roar, a divine spark of righteous fury that no shadow, no matter how thick, how ancient, or profound, could extinguish. It was a certainty that God's order, the mutable geometry of the divine, would prevail over the chaotic, asymmetrical madness of the darkness. The grove pulsed. The sinister rhythm intensified, becoming a thrumming vibration that I felt in my bones. The ground beneath my feet trembled, a low-frequency thrum that rattled my teeth and vibrated the fluid in my inner ear. It was a heartbeat. The earth itself was groaning under the weight of something unholy, something vast and burrowing, something stirring from a slumber of millennia. The heartbeat was a low, throbbing dirge that vibrated through the soles of my boots and up into my legs, a promise of impending, colossal movement. Shadows detached themselves from the tree line. They didn't just move, they writhed. They poured forward like spilled ink, taking shapes that made my stomach churn and my sanity fray. Grotesque, fleshy forms. Things with too many limbs, dragging bellies distended with a hunger that was palpable, a physical force. Their surfaces glistened like diseased skin, wet and mucosal, weeping a foul-smelling ichor. Their mouths gaped, filled with needle-like teeth that chattered, click, 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 in a language of pure madness. Their voices joined the woman's, a cacophony of tortured whispers promising secrets no human mind should hold, truths that would shatter the mind like glass. The possessed woman screamed again, her voice piercing the air like a civil defense siren. We're going to get you. She was closer now. She moved in a series of flickering, impossible dashes, darting between the trees with a speed that defied her contorted form. Her movements were jerky, stop motion, utterly unnatural. She moved like a puppet being jerked by an angry, invisible child, her limbs bending in ways that defied bone and sinew, elbows snapping backward with wet pops, knees inverting with a sickening gristle crunch. I stumbled back, my heel catching on a gnarled root that felt disturbingly like a cold, skeletal human arm. I fell, hard mud splashing into my eyes, blinding me. A new horror emerged from the fog, rising from the earth itself. It was a creature with a vaguely humanoid body, but its flesh was peeling away in wet, heavy strips, revealing not muscle or sinew, but a writhing, churning mass of worms beneath. Thousands of them, pink and gray and glistening, coiling and uncoiling, simulating the shape of a man with a nauseating constant motion. Its eyes were hollow sockets weeping a thick, black ichor, a tar-like substance that dripped onto the ground and hissed, burning the grass and melting the frost like acid. It lunged. Its claw, a composite of sharpened bone and solidified rock, grazed my arm. It didn't feel like a cut, it felt like a burn. A stinging, necrotic cold that bypassed the nerves and went straight to the blood, a frostbite of the soul. I felt death trying to seep into my veins, a gray spreading lethargy, a spiritual anemia radiating from the wound. Lord, you are my strength, I shouted. The shout was involuntary. It was a reflex of the spirit, a primal scream of defiance, and as it left my throat, the air around me warped. My faith was no longer an abstract concept, it manifested, a burning resolve, a realization that God's justice was not mere vengeance, but a restoration of order, a truth that could banish these abominations, because they were lies made of meat, walking contradictions to the divine blueprint. The woman appeared again, right in front of me, her form shimmering into existence. Her body split open, her chest cavity unzipped with a wet, tearing sound, the ribs cracking outward like the legs of a spider. Inside, there were no lungs, no heart. There was a pulsating core of flesh that throbbed with a sickly internal luminescence. We're going to get you, the core screamed, its voice a distorted, amplified version of her own. Tendrils erupted from her open chest, red, muscular whips lashing out toward my throat. I ducked, rolling through the freezing mud. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would fracture my sternum. I clung to my faith. I visualized it as a light, a high beam cutting through the fog, a blade forged in the foundries of heaven, glowing with the heat of 1,000 suns. The light flared. It wasn't a gentle glow. It was a flashbang, a concussive blast of pure radiance. It cut through the dark, rendering those chittering, flesh-warped nightmares into screaming silhouettes. They shrieked not in anger, but in pain. The light was physical to them. It burned. Their power crumbled before the fire of my belief, their forms smoking and blackening, as if exposed to a blast furnace. A vision struck me then. It was sudden, disorienting, a psychic blow to the back of the head. It was like waking up inside a nightmare where reality itself fractures and bends into new horrifying shapes. The sky above the grove tore open. It didn't just part. It ripped, revealing the raw, chaotic substrate of the universe. Jagged lightning, purple and gold, arched across the void. And through the tear I saw it, a city of gold, but not the soft, malleable gold of jewelry. This was weaponized gold. It pulsed with an unsettling, predatory energy. Its spires were sharp, glinting like the teeth of a beast, waiting to devour the heavens. It pierced the clouds, towering, majestic, terrifying. The tips caught the light in a way that seemed to scream of both salvation and judgment. It was a fortress, a stronghold. A promise roared in my mind, a voice that sounded like the ocean crashing against a cliff face, clear, unshakable, tectonic. May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble. May the name of the God of Jacob protect you. I saw angels. They were not the chubby winged infants of Renaissance paintings. They were entities of terrifying non-Euclidean geometry. Their forms blazed with light so intense it seared my retinas, leaving after images of burning wheels. Their wings crackled with fire, holy fire that didn't consume oxygen, but scorched the darkness itself, casting it back into the void from which it came. Their faces were hidden in blinding radiance, swirling with wheels and eyes. Their swords gleamed with divine fury, long blades of solidified starlight that hummed with a terrible energy. They clashed with the horde. It was a war of absolute scales, a battle of cosmic principles. The angels dove into the grove, their swords cleaving through the shadows. I saw the creatures, those twisted humanoid bodies, split apart, their skin peeled back to reveal pulsating cores of writhing worms. But the worms burned under the angelic blades, dissolving into ash. Their mouths screamed in unison with the woman's voice, a chorus of agony. We're going to get you. One creature, its limbs bent backward like a broken marionette, scuttled toward me on spider-like legs. It moved with terrifying speed. Its mouth split open, revealing a second, smaller maw inside the throat, a lamprey mouth of concentric, whirling teeth. It shrieked, a sound like shattering glass. Its claws slashed the air inches from my face, the wind of the blow chilling my sweat. I fell back, scrambling crab-like through the mud. My heart raced, my breath was ragged, burning my lungs. God, you are my fortress, I cried. Another twist, reality bent again. A figure I thought was an angel turned toward me. Its face melted. The golden light dripped away like hot wax, revealing a grotesque, leering mask beneath. Its eyes were hollow, weeping black fluid. It joined the horde, a test, a deception. My faith wavered for a nanosecond. Just a flicker, but I clamped down. I clung to the name. The name is a fortress, unyielding against the storm. The ground quaked. The trees splintered, exploding into showers of wood and sap, as if the earth itself were screaming in labor. I closed my eyes and pictured mountains collapsing into a sea that churned with black, frothing waves, the foam taking the shape of millions of clawing hands. But my faith held. It was an anchor in the bedrock of reality, a truth stronger than the chaos, a light brighter than any nightmare, a divine order that no horror, no matter how chaotic, could shatter. The vision twisted again. I was staggering through a desolate wasteland. The grove was gone. This was a place of ash and sorrow. The air was thick, suffocating, reeking of despair and burned ozone. The ground was littered with bones, millions of them, that crunched underfoot like brittle twigs. A grim truth struck me like a blow to the solar plexus. No one escapes death. We are all dust. Our lives slip into the grave's cold jaws with mathematical certainty. I saw shadows of the proud, the greedy, the kings of the earth who traded their souls for dark power. I saw their forms dissolving into ash, scattered by an unseen, uncaring wind. But then he appeared, a figure radiant, terrifying. He stood over a chasm that pulsed with screams, its edges lined with writhing skeletal figures clawing at the empty air. His face was a storm, a hurricane of judgment and mercy existing in the same space. His voice was a thunderclap, shattering the silence of the wasteland. It promised victory, not a negotiated peace, but total victory over the darkness. I saw him plunge into the abyss. He didn't fall, he attacked. He exploded outward, shattering the chains that bound those skeletal forms. Their mouths gaped in silent agony, then in release, snapped back to the grove. The possessed woman was there again. She was resilient. Her body was now a writhing mass of tendrils, a sea anemone of flesh and hate. Her scream, "We're going to get you," split the air as she lunged one final time. Her claws slashed my sleeve, tearing the fabric, grazing the skin. The icy burn returned. I stumbled. My vision blurred. The world tilted on its axis. Lord, you are my deliverer. Another horror emerged. A creature with no face, just a smooth expanse of pale, waxy skin where features should be. Its head erupted into a writhing mass of fleshy tendrils that pulsed with a sickly internal light. Its body lurched toward me, drawn by the scent of my fear. My faith flickered. The candle guttered in the storm, but I clung to the truth of the king, the word made flesh. His triumph wasn't just a theological concept, it was a physical law. It was the law that said chaos must yield to order. The struggle raged, light and dark, a cacophony of screams and clashing steel. But my faith screamed louder. It was a sonic weapon, a fire that burned eternal. The path grew darker, a suffocating tunnel. The air reeked of blood. The walls pulsed like living flesh, slick with oil. My own sins took form, ghastly figures wearing my face, their eyes weeping black ichor, whispering my failures. You failed, you fell, you are weak. O God, save me by your name and vindicate me by your strength. I shouted. The cry reverberated. It shattered the tunnel. Faith surged. A blazing light drove the shadows back. It dissolved them into wisps of smoke that screamed as they vanished. The woman's form collapsed. She didn't just fall, she disintegrated. Her body fell apart into a pile of writhing worms that scattered into the dark, burrowing into the mud to escape the light. Her scream lingered a fading echo. We're going to get you. But she was gone. I looked up. In the distance, through the clearing of the fog, I saw the city again. Its gates were guarded by towering beings, seraphim, with eyes like burning coals. Their wings shimmered with a light that sang. It was a song of divine order, a harmony that corrected the dissonance of the grove. My soul felt lighter. The weight was gone. Faith had cleansed it, lifting me toward God's presence, free from the horrors that clawed at my ankles. I collapsed, not in defeat, but in exhaustion. I lay on the wet grass under a sky that was no longer bruised, but blazing with stars, each star a testament to God's mercy. Bless the Lord, O my soul, who forgives all your sins, who heals all your wounds. The air buzzed. It was an eerie energy, the residue of the spiritual battle. Beauty and horror intertwined, the aftershock of the miraculous. But faith kept me grounded. I was a rock against the tide of dread. God's promise was unbroken. Despite my failures, despite the terror, his truth warmed me. It banished the cold grip of despair like a fire in the heart of winter. Those terrors, the crawling, flesh-warped abominations, the possessed woman's relentless screams, they had failed. In fact, they had served a purpose. They had driven me closer to his truth. Their threat was meaningless against the power of my faith, a faith that burned brighter than their malice. The world, scarred and broken, was held together by God's hand. Its beauty was a reflection of his love, a living testament to his unending power. Lord, you are my hope, I murmured. My voice was steady now. The shaking was gone. My heart was anchored. Dawn broke. The horizon erupted, not in gray, but in a blaze of gold and crimson. The sun burned away the night like a cleansing fire, vaporizing the mist, drying the mud. I looked to the hills, my heart crying out the ancient words. My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. The struggle of light and dark had played out in the theater of my mind and the reality of the grove. But faith assured me of victory. I stood on a cliff. Below me, the sea crashed against the rocks with a roar like a beast unleashed, a beast that was tamed, serving the glory of the Creator. And I sang, "Praise the Lord, O my soul." A final vision seized me, a new heaven and a new earth. The New Jerusalem descending from the heavens like a bride adorned for her husband. Its walls gleamed like polished crystal. Its streets were paved with gold that shimmered like liquid sunlight, transparent, pure. Its gates were radiant. The city pulsed with life. The air was free of fear. The light banished every shadow. No horror could touch it. No worm could burrow there. The faithful stood within. Their faces were aglow with eternal peace. Their voices rose in a hymn of unending praise. My faith, tested by the horrors of the night, stood unshaken. It was a beacon that had guided me through the gauntlet to this vision of divine triumph. I woke. I was back in the silent grove. The stars were fading into the dawn's embrace. The monsters were gone. The mud was just mud. The trees were just trees. My journey was a testimony, a gauntlet of terror where faith proved stronger than the darkest nightmares, stronger than the possessed woman's screams, stronger than the writhing horrors that sought to claim me. God, my refuge, had led me through the shadows, his light unyielding, his mercy boundless. I stand now a witness. My heart overflows with praise. I am certain that no horror, no chittering flesh-warped abomination, no echoing scream can sever me from him. He is the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega, the one who holds all things together. And in him I find my eternal peace.